What's up, guys? This is Zay here on my Paladin in the PTR testing realm for TBC Classic, making a follow-up video on my tier list before we had the announcement of the Burning Crusade and its release date. I think is January 13, and with that, there has been some proposed changes pushed onto the PTR realm that is potentially going to be pushed on the live servers, and I figured I'd give my thoughts about it since everybody's getting their thoughts about it. I'm going to try to make this video as quick and unedited as possible because I'm not gonna lie, I'm really lazy and I just want to just record my thoughts and just send it. So without further ado, here's my decent list of thoughts and takes, and we're just going to start with Bloodlust. Back in TBC 2021 and 2007, Bloodlust was introduced and it had no debuff. So you could essentially swap shamans into your pumper groups for parse reasons or for prog reasons to have a higher DPS increase. But now they've modernized that with the 10-minute stated debuff that also resets on wipe and boss kills. I think this is a good change. While this devalues shamans from their super OP standards, this puts them at a realistic level where you can only bring at most 6, but minimum you'll probably bring 5 max. You still need your resto shamans, you'll still need your elemental shamans for the hit totem, you'll still need enhancer shamans for your melee groups. There's just shamans pretty much define a lot of the groups this expansion, so I don't see that going away anytime soon. The resets on boss wipes and kills are also very, very important because Muru prog would be very frustrating from personal accounts. And I think back in the day, speaking of back in the day, I meant 2022, you would have to kind of be very wise about your choice with Lust, because if you did that Lust, you would have to wait for the cooldown to reset, and then you would have to continue. This is just a nice quality of life change, and honestly makes parse culture less toxic. There's a lot of weird cheesy shit going on with people that like to perform and get pink parses. We had the chicken meta where people would spam and proc different chickens, and then you had the lust meta, which, while I think that is fun, I don't think that is realistic for the second time around. I do like seeing changes that kind of smooth over those exploitive gameplay issues. And well, I'm speaking of that rather the chickens rather than the lust. I think the lust was genuinely bad game design that people just took advantage of. Anyways, account-wide attunements. This is good. I'm actually at the Thrallmar Quartermaster. I'd open it, but I already kind of looked at it since this is I think my second time recording this. But the original key, if you hit Revered, is 10 gold, and there is a pouch that is 100 gold that I think you'll have to buy for each character that will unlock the heroic dungeons if you have friendly rep. There's been a lot of debates. I've seen a lot of videos talking about how this could potentially harm the dungeon ecosystem for normal dungeons, but I heavily disagree. I think in phase 1, phase 2 specifically, people will still run these for previous gear and items. Karazhan, Gruul's Lair, Mag's Lair would be still relevant content throughout those 2 phases. Maybe you'll see a bit of a drop off in the later phases, obviously just because of Black Temple progression, because of ZA, because of additional badge vendor gear that gets released. That's just a natural thing that happens with dungeons, but it won't be a steep fall off cliff I think recently Warmane did their Onyxia realm, and I think they're in Sunwell right now. But if you queue as any class or spec in the RDF finder, I know I'm talking about private servers, but I'm just giving you a metric of how dungeons just completely fall off a cliff after the later phases. I don't think that will happen here. I also think it won't happen just because, like, you don't have RDF. You kind of have to post an LFG, so people will always be willing to run dungeons. And you'll still need to farm the rep if you can to get, I think, the exalted items. I think for casters you'll still have to farm for, I think it's called Stormcaller on Horde side. I'll check, but I just want to focus on this. But yeah, overall good change. I don't think it will be too bad. I think you can still find groups to run with, and it'll even be easier to get into heroics without having to grind. I feel like that type of hump also kind of fixes a lot of things. Where, like, if you're leveling a fresh tune, you have to get like the revered rep to get access to those dungeons, which is, I don't think it's viable. Post nerf raids, I'm a little bit mixed on this. So I put it into two categories of why I think it's good and why I think it's bad. It's good for the overall health of the game. If people disagree with me on that, I think, like, people need to understand that yes, TBC with a challenge, with pre-nerf raids is still very fun, but these are different times now. If you told me, post-nerf is really bad for the game back in 2021 on the original re-release, I would have agreed with you. I think it would be nice to kind of see what that environment was like. But now, Classic is like, what, 5-6 years old now, and we've already went through these iterations a couple times. So if you are a returning player or a new player that maybe is coming from retail, or just a new player that just wants to get into the older version of the game, this is going to be great. Prog's going to be 1 to 2 days, practically even 1 day. Muru prog is going to be less bad. And Sunwell, I think a lot of guilds, there's this thing of like running your head into a wall and then completing it to get that satisfaction when you down the boss or kill the boss. But I honestly think now people just want to just clear the content. Like, this content isn't hard. Excuse me. The bosses aren't hard either. So I don't really see any good arguments against, post nerf raids at the moment. If you do have a good one, just leave it in the comment section. I'll read it. This also bumps melee comps. So Fury Warriors are going to be fucking crazy. I think especially because the biggest problem of TBC was the trash, and some of the boss mechanics would completely just cleave melee. Again, TBC is a very unfriendly expansion towards melee, and Fury Warrior scales pretty good over the course of the expansion. And so if you have these bosses that are nerfed, and you have these I don't think trash packs will be nerfed, but if you have generally a lot of these hard encounters being nerfed, you can justify a lot of melee comps that can come in. And in that token, just like I reiterate, there's no guild breaking bosses. I have a personal account from my friend Boss Baby, shout out to him, that's the GOAT, who talked about recruiting back in Vosh and KT. It was really hard. And I would honestly lament to that. Like, recruiting, the people that you would recruit at that time would literally be rogues, warriors, people that aren't playing like useful utility classes. Not saying that warriors and rogues are giga useless, but you would probably need like, what, a shaman. Like, you have a shaman that like quit, so you have to bring another shaman in. You don't want to like beg people to like re-roll specs or re-roll classes. So that was like a big headache kind of sifting through, especially as an officer. And I want to say with that, it's less time consuming of an expansion overall, especially if GDKP is still banned. That means less money for consumes. You're spending less. I'm not saying, I'm not condoning swiping, but like, if you swipe for your consumes, you're going to spend less money swiping for them, especially with the new, I think, elixir system and pot system. And it genuinely respects your time, which is another argument of why I feel like this is good, because I don't really want to hit my head against the wall against, really difficult bosses. That's just, I mean, I don't know. That's just me. Some people might like that challenge and like the prestige. And I think that pours over into why I think it's bad. And I honestly want to pull on this one first because I'm talking about it now, where that lesser challenge might feel like it's more of a museum like experience than content you can progress through as a team. Like I said, it's this content is old. Like it's like what, 20 plus years old now. It's not, exactly hard. I would say maybe it's more like DPS or like mechanic checks that is just really difficult to pass. And it's a bit of a learning curve that people have to understand, just like any other raid boss or encounter before you have it on farm. And that like lack of a challenge will also mean that, tier 6 and Sunwell will just be a joke. Obviously, this doesn't apply to first time raiders, like I said. If this is your first time playing TBC Classic, this is still going to be an enjoyable experience, even more so with the quality of life features. The only thing that I can really say will have an immediate effect is that rogues will be even more useless in groups. And I'm not saying that diss rogues. I know I've seen a lot of like rogue commenters in my tier list videos saying like, yo, rogues deserve to be high on the list. Trust me, dude. Playing a rogue for PvE especially was really horrible. And it's the reason why I'm saying, or I said in that video, cherish that spot, because it's really difficult to get into a guild that already has that spot locked down. So that's my overall, perspective about that. Still, people are going to wipe because of nerfs, or regardless of nerfs. People are going to wipe due to mechanics, due to people being idiots. That's just the nature of WoW itself, and you're going to have more new people coming in that haven't experienced the expansion before, so you're just going to wipe regardless. Now on to a little bit of PvP section. We're having our arena rating start at 1500 with the option to reset back to that level with gold. You'll have your individual rating and the rating requirements and cost of guild reduced. This is just a flat out good change. I just want to say shout out to all the PvPers. They rarely get thrown any, quality updates towards their systems. Honestly, they're like throwing scraps, and most of like the updates are given to PvE enjoyers. I also say it's beneficial because some PvP items are really good for gearing phase 1 and phase 2. And I'm gonna reference phase 1, phase 2 heavily because, that will be most of the time that you spent. I don't want to look too much into the future, but if I had to, you could say as a warrior, you'll also need your axes. I think that's season 3 or 4 that you get your axes in. That will be a sizable DPS increase compared to like if you're not a glaive wearer or if you don't have blacksmithing. I highly recommend you get blacksmithing. It also makes arena new player friendly. I think also a big part of TBC that was awesome and accessible is just arena. There's less development with classes over time. Like obviously you'll have classes that like develop over time in each expansion, which over time could create bloat, and it has created bloat in retail. So this is like the most simplified version of PvP that you can get that isn't world PvP, which overall is just great. Like I don't, see any problem with that. One section I also want to talk about is the character boosts and how mage and paladin boosting is heavily nerfed. I did some testing over this week just trying to boost an RFC with the mage, and from when I did it with like I think 1 or 2 level 8s. They got like 3 to 4 XP per mob. Terrible. I don't want to yap too much about like what dungeons are nerfed in detail because I don't want to make this video long, but basically the general gist is that boosting is nerfed even if you have like a good dungeon to boost on. You're not going to get as much XP. And I'm a stitch that with you. We don't have 58 character boosts for Draenei and Blood Elves, along with increased Terracone spawn rates and more nodes. This is generally bad because since boosting's dead, which I don't care about boosting, that's whatever. The problem is that the bots are now going to destroy open world farming, which means that RMT is going to heavily increase. That's my prediction. A lot of Terracone is used for flasks and used for, I think, haste pots or whatever. So it's going to be really expensive. I don't even think people buy that much pots, especially in phase 1, to parse. But since we have a very different climate of players, lots of players that like to min-max and like to have their professions maxed out just to have the smoothest gearing experience or clearing experience, this is going to be pretty expensive. And I think it's cringe that we don't have like Draenei or Blood Elf boosts. It's really cringe. And I say that because I personally don't care much about pay to win ruining the game, simply because people have spent thousands of dollars on classic consumed straight on fresh. People have swiped for Lionheart Helm. And if GDKP is still going to be banned, people are just going to swipe more just to get their gear, just to get their professions leveled up, to get the gear. So this is a huge issue. I don't know if this would increase the amount of people that would swipe or gold people would swipe, or if this would decrease just due to having less flask or whatever. If that's the case, I heavily ask Blizzard to reconsider the ban on GDKP. I've seen that the WoW token has been data mined in the files. Who knows if that token will come and if GDKP would be allowed. It seems that as of right now, there's still a firm stance on no GDKP, no strictly no to that. So I think overall these changes are pretty good. I think quality of life changes are really nice. Post nerf is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I don't know how people will react to that, and they didn't really say specifically what bosses are being nerfed, but I'm assuming since this patch the PTR was released with I think it's around Sunwell, that's where most of the bosses are kind of nerfed at, like for Vosh, KTE, some bosses in Black Temple, etc. So yeah, I mean, quick burn through some of these notes. I don't want to make this a big long video. You see my bell up is kind of AFK. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'm still gonna be playing TBC. If you need a guild, I will be on the Night Slayer PvP realm on Horde side. So let me know. And this is Zay. Thanks, guys.